Still playing with your little computer projects? My cousin Bradley said it with the kind of condescending smile that only someone who peaked in high school could muster. He was leaning back in his chair at my grandmother's dining table, loosening his belt after his third helping of ham. Surrounded by aunts and uncles who hung on his every word like he was delivering a TED Talk instead of recycled financial advice he stolen from a podcast. When are you going to get a real job, Willa? I mean, I'm at First National now. Junior Vice President. Corner office. You know what that means? He didn't wait for an answer. It means stability. It means respect. It means I'm not living in my childhood bedroom coding until 3 a.m. like some kind of basement dweller. The table laughed. Not everyone, but enough. My Aunt Patricia, Bradley's mother, practically glowed with pride. My own mother looked down at her plate, embarrassed. My father cleared his throat and changed the subject to football, but the damage was done. Again. I didn't respond. I had stopped responding to Bradley's comments about 4 years ago, right around the time I realized that explaining software development to him was like explaining quantum physics to a golden retriever. He would never understand. He didn't want to understand. He just wanted to feel superior. What Bradley didn't know, what nobody at that table knew except me, was that in approximately 7 minutes, my phone was going to ring. And when it did, everything was going to change. Drop a comment and let me know where you're re-listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. My name is Willa Danvers. I'm 29 years old. And for the past 6 years, I have been building something that nobody in my family understood or cared about. It started in college. I was a computer science major at a state school that nobody had heard of, surrounded by kids whose parents couldn't afford the Ivy League price tag. We were the scrappy ones. The hungry ones. The ones who knew that we would have to work 3 times as hard to get half the opportunities that kids from wealthy families were handed on silver platters. During my junior year, I had an idea. It wasn't a revolutionary idea at first, just a frustration that I wanted to solve. I was working part-time as a teaching assistant, and I noticed that students struggled with the same coding concepts over and over. They would make the same mistakes, hit the same walls, give up at the same points. The existing tools to help them were clunky, outdated, and about as user-friendly as a tax form written in ancient Greek. So I started building something better. I called it CodeMentor. It was an AI-powered learning assistant that could analyze a student's code in real time, identify where they were going wrong, and guide them toward the solution without just giving them the answer. It was like having a patient, infinitely knowledgeable tutor available 24 hours a day. I worked on it for 2 years. Nights, weekends, holidays. While my friends were at parties, I was debugging algorithms. While Bradley was posting Instagram photos of his grind at the bank, which apparently consisted of wearing expensive suits and taking clients to lunch, I was living on ramen and Diet Coke, teaching myself machine learning from YouTube tutorials and academic papers I could barely understand. My family didn't get it. My father, a plumber who had worked with his hands his entire life, couldn't understand why I would choose to sit in front of a screen all day. You're smart, he would say. You could be a doctor, a lawyer, something respectable. My mother just wanted me to be happy, but her definition of happy included a husband, children, and a house in the suburbs, not a woman in her late 20s who had chosen a keyboard over a family. And then there was Bradley. Bradley had been the golden child of our generation since birth. He was 2 years older than me, handsome in a generic way, and possessed of an unearned confidence that somehow convinced everyone around him that he was destined for greatness. He got average grades, but he got into a decent college because his father knew someone. He got a mediocre job at a regional bank, but he talked about it like he was running Goldman Sachs. He drove a leased BMW that he couldn't actually afford and lived in an apartment that his parents subsidized, but he acted like he was entirely self-made. And at every family gathering, without fail, he would find a way to diminish whatever I was doing. Still playing with computers had become his signature greeting. It was always delivered with that smirk, that head tilt, that tone that said, I am a serious adult doing serious things, and you are a child with a hobby. For years, I let it roll off me. I told myself that success would be the best revenge. I told myself that when CodeMentor finally took off, I wouldn't need to say a word. The results would speak for themselves. And then, 8 months ago, the results started speaking. I had launched CodeMentor as a beta 2 years prior, offering it free to students at my alma mater. The response was overwhelming. Within 6 months, I had 15,000 active users. Within a year, universities started reaching out, asking if they could license the software. I hired my first employee, a former classmate named Jordan who believed in what I was building, and we incorporated as a real company. The growth was exponential. 50,000 users. And then, 2 months ago, Microsoft called. Not an email. Not a LinkedIn message. An actual phone call from someone in their corporate development division. They had been watching CodeMentor's growth. They were impressed with our technology, our user engagement, our retention metrics. They wanted to talk about an acquisition. The first offer was $1.2 million. I said no. The second offer was $2.1 million. I said no again. My lawyer, a brilliant woman named Sandra Chen who specialized in tech acquisitions, told me I was either brilliant or insane. They want your software badly, she said. Every time you say no, they come back higher. But there's a limit, Willa. Don't push too far. I told her I wanted $3 million minimum, plus a guarantee that CodeMentor would remain accessible to students from low-income backgrounds. That was non-negotiable. I hadn't built this to become a tool only rich kids could afford. Sandra took the counteroffer to Microsoft. That was 4 days ago. She told me she expected to hear back by Christmas Eve at the latest. Which brought me to my grandmother's dining table, listening to Bradley explain why his junior vice president title at a regional bank made him more successful than anyone else in the family. The thing is, Bradley was saying, gesturing with his fork, real success requires discipline. Structure. You can't just sit around hoping that your little app is going to make you rich. The world doesn't work that way. You need to pay your dues. Work your way up. That's what I've done. Bradley got another promotion this year, Aunt Patricia added, beaming. His boss says he's the most promising young executive they've had in a decade. That's wonderful, my grandmother said politely. She was 84 years old and had long ago learned to stay neutral in family disputes. But I caught her glancing at me with something like sympathy in her eyes. She didn't understand what I did any more than Bradley did, but she had always believed in me. She was the only one who had. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and glanced at the screen. Sandra Chen. My heart rate spiked. This was it. Either Microsoft had accepted my terms, or they had walked away. Either way, my life was about to change. Willa, phones at the table? Aunt Patricia said disapprovingly. We're in the middle of dinner. Let her check it, Bradley said magnanimously, waving his hand. Maybe one of her little apps finally got a download. More laughter. I ignored it. I stood up from the table. Excuse me. I need to take this. I walked into my grandmother's living room and answered the call. Willa, Sandra said. Her voice was controlled, professional, but I could hear something underneath. Excitement. I'm so sorry to call on Christmas Eve. I know you're with family. It's fine, Sandra. What did they say? They came back with a counter. They're willing to meet your accessibility requirements for low-income students. They want to integrate CodeMentor into their existing educational platform and keep the core product free for qualifying users, I exhaled. That was the part one cared about most. And the number? $3.2 million. Cash. Plus a consulting contract for 2 years at $200,000 annually if you want it. They want you to help with the integration. I sat down on my grandmother's couch. My legs felt weak. $3.2 million. Plus $400,000 over 2 years. $3.6 million total. Willa? Are you there? I'm here. I'm just processing. I understand. This is a significant offer. One of the largest I've seen for a solo founder at your stage. You should be incredibly proud of what you've built. She paused. Shall I accept? I was about to answer when I heard footsteps behind me. I turned. Bradley was standing in the doorway, arms crossed, that smirk still on his face. Important call from your gaming buddies? He asked. We're about to do dessert. Grandma made her famous pie. You know, actual accomplishments worth celebrating. Something shifted inside me. 6 years of comments. 6 years of condescension. 6 years of being treated like a child with a toy while I was building something real. I had planned to accept the offer quietly, to tell my family later, to avoid making a scene. But in that moment, with Bradley standing there in his overpriced suit and his leased watch, I made a different decision. Sandra, I said into the phone, loudly enough for Bradley to hear. I'm with family right now. My cousin was just asking about my work. Do you mind if I put you on speaker so I can share the good news? Of course, Sandra said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. She knew exactly what I was doing. I tapped the speaker button and walked back toward the dining room. Bradley followed, confusion replacing his smirk. Everyone, I said, standing at the head of the table. I'm sorry to interrupt dessert, but I just received an important call from my lawyer. I'd like to share it with you. My mother looked up, worried. My father frowned. Aunt Patricia rolled her eyes. My grandmother leaned forward, intrigued. Sandra, I said, could you please repeat what you just told me? Of course. Sandra's voice filled the room, crisp and professional. Microsoft Corporation has made a final offer to acquire CodeMentor, the educational software platform developed by Willa Danvers. The silence in the dining room was absolute. I could hear the clock ticking on the wall. I could hear someone's fork clatter against a plate. Bradley's face had gone pale. His mouth was open slightly, but no sound came out. "I'm sorry," Aunt Patricia said slowly. "Did you say Microsoft? As in, the Microsoft?" "Yes, ma'am," Sandra replied. "Microsoft Corporation, headquartered in Redmond, Washington. They've been in negotiations with Willa for approximately 2 months regarding this acquisition." My father stood up from his chair. "Willa? You're telling me that Microsoft wants to pay you $3 million for something you built?" $3.2 million, Dad. Plus the consulting contract." My mother burst into tears. My grandmother was smiling, that quiet, knowing smile she always had when she turned out to be right about something. "Willa," Sandra said from the phone. "I need a decision. Shall I accept the offer?" I looked around the table. I looked at my parents, who had worried about me for years and were now staring at me like they were seeing me for the first time. I looked at my grandmother, who had never stopped believing. I looked at Aunt Patricia, whose expression had shifted from disdain to something that looked almost like respect. And then I looked at Bradley. He was still standing in the doorway, frozen. His face had cycled through shock, disbelief, and was now settling on something that looked like nausea. I could see him doing the math in his head. $3.2 million. His junior vice president salary was probably around $85,000, maybe $90,000 with bonuses. It would take him nearly 40 years to earn what I was about to make in a single transaction. "Yes, Sandra," I said, not breaking eye contact with Bradley. "Accept the offer." "Wonderful. I'll send over the paperwork tonight." "Congratulations, Willa. You've earned this." "Thank you, Sandra. Merry Christmas." I ended the call. The room exploded. My father grabbed me in a bear hug so tight I could barely breathe. My mother was sobbing and laughing at the same time. My grandmother was clapping her hands, saying, "I knew it, I always knew it." Aunts and uncles and cousins were crowding around, asking questions, offering congratulations, suddenly very interested in the little computer projects they had ignored for 6 years. Bradley hadn't moved. He was still standing in the doorway, looking like someone had just told him his car had been repossessed. I extracted myself from the crowd and walked over to him. The room went quiet, sensing what was about to happen. "Bradley," I said calmly. "You asked when I was going to get a real job. I think I have an answer now." He swallowed hard. "Willa, I didn't know. I was just joking around. You know how family is." "You weren't joking. You've been belittling me at every family gathering for 6 years. You called my work playing with computers. You called me a basement dweller. You told everyone I was wasting my life while you were building something real." I paused. "Well, I just built something real enough for Microsoft to pay $3.2 million for it. How's that compare to your corner office?" His face reddened. "That's not fair. I didn't have your advantages." "My advantages?" I almost laughed. "Bradley, I went to a state school no one's heard of. I taught myself to code from free online resources. I built CodeMentor while eating ramen and sleeping 4 hours a night because I couldn't afford to hire help. Meanwhile, your dad got you your first internship, your parents pay half your rent. And you drive a car you can't afford because you think appearances matter more than substance." The room was dead silent. Aunt Patricia looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. "I'm not saying this to humiliate you," I continued. "I'm saying it because you need to hear it. Success isn't about titles or offices or how impressive you sound at dinner parties. Success is about building something that matters. Something that helps people. Something that outlasts you. You've spent 6 years mocking me for chasing that. Now you get to watch me achieve it." I turned to the rest of the family. "I love all of you. I know you didn't understand what I was doing. I know it looked like I was wasting my potential. But I need you to understand something. I was never playing. I was working. Harder than most people will ever work in their lives. And I did it without support, without encouragement, without anyone believing in me except Grandma." I looked at her. Her eyes were glistening. "Thank you for never giving up on me. I always knew you were special," she said softly. "From the day you were born." My mother wiped her eyes. "Willa, I'm so sorry. I should have believed in you more. I should have asked more questions instead of just worrying." "It's okay, Mom. You were scared for me. I understand that now." My father shook his head slowly. $3 million. My daughter. The one I told to become a doctor. He laughed, a disbelieving, proud laugh. "I guess you knew better than your old man. You taught me to work hard, Dad. That's worth more than any degree." The rest of the evening was a blur of questions and celebrations. People wanted to know everything. "How did you start? What made you keep going? What are you going to do with the money?" I answered as best I could, trying to be gracious, trying not to let the vindication go to my head. Bradley left early. He claimed he had a work emergency, but everyone knew the truth. He couldn't stand to be in the room while the basement dweller was being celebrated. Aunt Patricia followed him out, shooting me a look that was somewhere between resentment and grudging respect. I didn't care. I wasn't doing this for Bradley. I wasn't even doing it for myself, really. I was doing it for every kid who was told their dreams were stupid. Every person who was mocked for being different. Every quiet builder who was overshadowed by loud talkers. At the end of the night, after everyone had gone home, and I was helping my grandmother clean up, she took my hand and looked at me with those sharp, knowing eyes. "Willa," she said. "I'm proud of the money. But I'm prouder of how you handled it. You could have been cruel to Bradley. You could have rubbed his face in it. But you just told the truth. That takes more strength than revenge." He needed to hear it, Grandma. Not to hurt him. But because maybe, just maybe, it'll make him think about how he treats people. She nodded slowly. "That's wisdom, child. That's wisdom." The deal closed 6 weeks later. I deposited $3.2 million into my bank account on a Tuesday afternoon. I stared at the number for a long time. It didn't feel real. It still doesn't, most days. The first thing I did was pay off my parents' house. My father cried when I told him. He tried to refuse, said he didn't need charity from his daughter. I told him it wasn't charity. It was gratitude. For every time he drove 3 hours to visit me at college. For every care package my mother sent. For every moment they worried about me, even when they didn't understand what I was doing. The second thing I did was set up a scholarship fund at my alma mater. The Danvers Family Scholarship for students in computer science from low-income backgrounds. It funds 3 students per year, full tuition. I wanted to give other kids the chance I almost didn't have. The third thing I did was start a new company. Because that's who I am. I'm a builder. The money was never the point. The building was always the point. Bradley reached out to me 2 months after Christmas. He sent a LinkedIn message that was clearly written and rewritten a dozen times. He apologized for how he had treated me over the years. He said he had done a lot of thinking. He said he realized that he had been projecting his own insecurities onto me. Because he was afraid of people who actually took risks while he played it safe. I read the message 3 times. Then I replied, "Thank you for saying that, Bradley. I hope you find something that makes you as happy as building makes me." I meant it. I don't hate Bradley. I don't wish him ill. I just don't need his approval anymore. I never did. I just thought I did. I'm sitting at my desk now, in the small office I rented downtown. It's nothing fancy, just a room with a window, a whiteboard, and the best computer setup money can buy. I'm working on a new project. It's bigger than Code Mentor. Riskier. The kind of thing that might fail spectacularly or might change the world. Either way, I'll have built something. And that's all I've ever wanted. The people who mock your dreams don't get a vote in your future. The people who belittle your work don't get to define your worth. The people who call you crazy for trying are usually just scared to try themselves. Keep building. Keep coding. Keep creating. Keep going when nobody believes in you except yourself. Because one day, your phone might ring at Christmas dinner. And everything will change. If you've ever been told your dreams were too small, your goals were too crazy, or your work was just playing around, hit that like button and share this story. You never know who needs to hear that their little projects might just be worth millions.